I am Aparna Bonsai-Dodson. I'm the Deputy Director for the North Central Climate Adaptation Science Center. I'm joined by Dr. Elisa Wade, our Research Coordinator. So thank you for joining us today. We're going to try to go through some informational slides first, just kind of recapping what's in the solicitation document, and then we'll open it up for questions. As you can see, we have a number of just high-level topics that we want to hit, and then we will cover some frequently asked questions. We have a couple that have come in previous years, and then, you know, whatever questions you have, you're welcome to ask us. So just kind of quickly, we do have some eligibility criteria that restrict our ability to disperse funding. You basically have to have a primary investigator that is either a member of one of our host or consortium institutions, which are listed here on this slide, or from any USGS center or program. You can then have any additional co-investigators from institutions across federal, state, tribal, NGO institutions, but that primary investigator has to be from one of those groups. If you do have other partners and the primary is a university person, that goes through the host institution. And then if you have subsequent co-investigators, then it trickles out that way. So if you have some complicated institutional partnerships that you're proposing, feel free to reach out to us and we can help you kind of navigate which direction the funding is going to go in. For this submission, we anticipate that we're going to have somewhere between $375,000 to $450,000 available. We do understand that congressional budget action took place yesterday, but we don't yet have the information for how that's going to trickle down to our program. But we will be able to maybe provide some more definite numbers once we know that. We're hoping that we can fund projects that are about 2 years in length and that do not exceed $250,000. If you think that you're going to exceed either the duration or the amount, please let us know and contact us, and we can have some conversation about maybe breaking your project up into phases or sort of thinking about how we may want to structure that. So in terms of start dates, so we did have passage of full year budget action. Normally it takes about 60 days for that funding to trickle down to our program. So that's kind of when we anticipate a change of allocation would occur. If you're going through a university, we do have to obtain secretarial clearance for any grants or cooperative agreements, and that in the past has taken quite a long time. So we are encouraging people to not think of starting a project prior to January 2021. The schedule of submissions is also in the funding document, but we released the opportunity. Some statements of interest are due January 14th, and those are about 2 pages. We're going to try to review all of the statements of interest in a 2-week period around late January and notify applicants whether or not they've been selected to draft a full proposal by early February. Invited full proposals will be due March 31st, and then we're going to conduct technical reviews throughout April. And we hope that we can have intent to award by early May out to PIs. Again, intent to award means that we have selected the project for funding, but there still may be other administrative reviews to complete formal awards. This obviously, like I said, is dependent on congressional action, and we still don't know what that congressional action that was taken yesterday means for our program. So we may have some delays in terms of that trickle down USGS PIs. As I said, we can probably immediately start projects in May whenever they're selected for funding, and the university projects will take a little bit longer. So just in terms of the actual flow of paperwork, we do statements of interest and initial full proposals through an internal platform called RFP Manager, which if you've seen the solicitation document, that's kind of the same application portal. And then if you are selected for funding, as I said, with a USGS PI, we do a change of allocation to your cost center. For a project that has a university PI, we then do a formal application through grants.gov for them to receive funding. If you're working through the university or the consortium, you don't have to run your statement of interest through that host institution CU Boulder, but you will have to run your full proposal through them because you will have to pass that paperwork through their institution and you would receive your funding as a subcontract. So at that point, you will have to make sure that you have their overhead built in and things like that. And the contact information for Dr. Jennifer Balch, the head of the University Consortium, is available in that solicitation document. And I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to talk a little bit about our science approach and our priorities.
So it's really important to the CASC that we fund actionable science. And when we are talking about actionable science, we mean climate-informed science that for the management of fish and wildlife and their habitat, but that has a direct end user in mind. So going into the project, knowing who the end user is and what the point of having the science done. The proposer seeking more information can watch a video. There's a link there, but I'll quickly review what we talk about in the video, and that is that you can think about actionable science as one important piece of that is stakeholder engagement. And stakeholder engagement has this spectrum of possible ways of working with your end users and your stakeholders. And that would be at one end of the spectrum, kind of the least amount of time and the fewest engagements would be a communication. So communication of results. And that often happens at the end of a project. And moving to your right, you might start to consult with people with several engagements over time, or moving even farther to the right, doing true collaborative science. So ongoing engagement. The end user helps you think of both the kind of the general approach and maybe regular interventions to talk about methods or kind of what kind of data are going to come out of it and how to present it. And then the final on the far right would be full co-production, and that is where the end user is a true member of the science team and really helps you even think through the process from start to finish, even helps you come up with the questions, really starting from the beginning. And I want to say that it's not critical that it be co-production, but usually collaboration is something we're looking for. And it's not to say that that's the only way to do it, and we're really just hoping people will proactively think about why they're choosing one of these types and explain how that makes sense, because maybe you've already done a lot of collaborative work and now you're kind of going to just move forward on a next process. So no right answer here, but we want you to think through proactively where you are in the stakeholder engagement spectrum. To be clear, I want to make sure we all use the same definitions. It really helps us to review the statements of interest. That when we talk about an investigator, that's a member of the primary project team. So a PI or a co-PI should only be somebody who is absolutely engaged in part of the science. A partner is any kind of cooperator who makes some kind of significant contribution to the success of the project. And then a stakeholder could also be a partner, but a stakeholder is somebody who's a resource manager or decision maker. They're the end user of the data or of the project or the science that comes from the proposed work. So we have 4 topics, science priority topics that we're looking to fund in this RFP. And we have 2 that are really narrowly scoped, and I'll start with those, and then I'll finish up with 2 that are more broadly scoped. So the first one, topic A, is this typology of climate vulnerability and adaptation for understudied species. There's a lot of needed work right now on a lot of understanding how climate will impact, and then therefore how we can manage and adapt for climate for species that we don't have a lot of information, but we can't possibly fund all the possible work that needs to be done. So we're looking to develop some kind of looking for a researcher to propose a way to develop and pilot a typology for identifying climate sensitivity and adaptive capacity, which are two critical pieces of climate vulnerability, for a community guild or other grouping of species. And this would be for some kind of species that is either cryptic or we just don't have a lot of information around. The typology would serve as some kind of foundation or maybe a decision tree for identifying most appropriate climate adaptation management actions for those species. And the focus would be on some kind of specific species or group about which little is known. So cryptic, or just we need more information, but we need it now. And the long-term goal would to have this serve as a potential framework for some broader application to other cryptic species and guilds. Our second science priority topic, so B, is looking at projections of future flows and temperatures in streams. This is something that has been asked for across our region. And so we're looking for a proposal to really think through how to best approach projections of future flows and temperatures in streams. So this one would require really strong engagement with an array of stakeholders to identify and then synthesize the best available data, models, or methods. We don't know if these already exist for projecting future flows and temperatures. Assess resource managers' planned uses for the flow and temperature data, so both temperature and flow, and there may be different answers for those about what's out there and what's needed. Identify the state of the science for projecting the future stream flow and temperature, and assessment of the ability of leading methods and models to meet the articulated management needs. So what's out there, what's needed, and how well is what's out there meeting possible to meet those needs. And then kind of setting the foundation for future work by identifying technically feasible next steps for increasing usability and accessibility of both temperature and flow projections across our region. All right, so then moving into the more broadly scoped science priority topic, C is general scientific support for DOI bureaus or state fish and wildlife agencies that generally follow some of our scientific priorities that are outlined in our strategic science plan, which is available through a link on the RFP. So we're looking for science that supports and informs either important or high profile publicly sensitive management plan or decision-making process. So again, really looking for something that has an end user in mind, a management plan or decision-making process that can demonstrably serve as a framework or case study example. So we're really looking to move beyond one-off projects and thinking about how we can ensure that this has an ongoing life, that we're providing science that really moves the needle long-term. Project work can include conducting scientific syntheses, generating novel science, or carrying out science integration workshops. So we're defining science broadly here. And then our final science priority topic, D, is similar, but it's scientific support for tribes and other tribal entities. So the guidelines are effectively the same as what I just talked about, trying to meet the priorities as outlined in our strategic plan. And again, it's really important that we must explicitly ensure tribal sovereign management of resources by including at least one tribe or tribal entity as a full investigator on this project. Articulating a framework for bringing in input from tribal members and ensuring that this input is incorporated into the project. So working really tightly coupled in a collaborative and co-produced way with a tribal entity. And topics could be of import, should obviously be of import to the tribe. So topics of interest to the North Central CASC. Some examples is not comprised but are not limited to ideas of such as culturally important keystone species, first foods, bison, medicinal plants, fishing, gathering, and other first food resources.
So once you kind of have your project idea and you put in your statement of interest, I just wanted to highlight that our SOI review criteria are pretty heavily weighted towards management significance and your stakeholder engagement for actionable science. So 60% of how you're going to be reviewed is, do you have your stakeholders, science and users, partners at the table? Do you understand kind of what they're looking for? Within 2 pages, we're not really going to be strongly assessing the scientific merit. We're really looking to see, do you have the right people at the table for your project? When we do solicit full proposals and then we review them, we do place a higher emphasis on scientific merit and your study team and your budget plan, but that climate-informed management significance and your stakeholder engagement are still fairly sizable evaluation components. So just to reiterate that we don't expect every project by any means to do co-production, but we do expect that you have your stakeholders at the table and that you've thought about how to bring them into the project at what point and in what forms and for what purposes. Some criteria to note that are not requirements but that are encouraged are that investigators should consider the inclusion of early career researchers and partners. And so we're defining that as someone who's within 5 years of a master's or doctoral degree or someone who has assistant faculty status. And as I mentioned, this could be either on the research side or the end user side. We also encourage you to think specifically about your communications plan or your stakeholder engagement plan, describing your approach for that partnership. And then we also encourage that you think about how you would evaluate the success of your science and your stakeholder engagement. So understanding that these things take resources, and if you have parts of your budget set aside to do these things, that is completely understood and encouraged. Just to give you an idea of our anticipated deliverables, we do require that each project creates a data management plan, and we have a data steward who works with the PI to make sure that that's kept up to date. We expect annual reports that are due actually before the end of the grant year, and that's so that we can ensure that projects are making satisfactory progress, and that is then how we decide whether to continue to provide out your funding or whether we need to look at whether a project needs to be rescoped. And then final reports and all final products are due within 90 days of the project end date. With our USGS investigators, we understand that there are internal review processes that can sometimes take those products outside of that 90 days. We just ask that you communicate with us, you provide us with drafts that we don't release so that we know that you have things in motion. And then Elisa will periodically check in with you through emails and phone calls just to give touch points to make sure projects are progressing as intended. And then, so some frequently asked questions that we've received in the past. One is whether we can modify our hosting cooperative agreement with CU Boulder to transfer funds. No, that hosting agreement is structured for a specific purpose and has a specific statement of work associated with it. So we can't use that to help move project funds. Can we use cooperative ecosystem studies units agreements to transfer funds? And we can only do that if a CESU employee is part of the investigator team. CESUs have lower overhead rates than the traditional university overhead rates. So we have agreed with the universities not to use CESUs as ways to bypass those standard overhead agreements. And the last one is whether funds can be transferred directly from USGS to a consortium institution or institution other than the host. And as a general matter, no, we do have some restrictions to our budget authority and what we're allowed to do. But we have been able to move funds for certain small non-research activities in the past, but that does require some case-by-case discussion and approval. And at this point, I will stop here, and I know that we have a few people on the call. You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask questions if you have them.
Hi, this is Theo Barnhart up in Montana. Can we include like letters of support with our statement of interest?
We don't require them. You could include them as supplementary material. We just ask that you don't go overboard because we'll have quite a lot to read through in the 2 weeks at the end of January. I will say that if you include letters of support, they really should be explicit in the role or the needs of that person writing the letter. We would prefer that letters of support don't generally say, I've worked with this person in the past, they're a good guy, give them money. But it's what we're primarily looking for in a letter of support is the explicit, this is what we do, this is what we need in order to do that better, and this person will provide it to us in this way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
Hello?
Hey, Owen.
Can you hear me? Yeah, this is Owen McKenna. I have a question about the investigator status. So thinking about this co-production model, if someone is a co-PI, does that necessarily mean that they need to have funding from the grant itself?
No, they don't. And we understand that often you're bringing in people who may, especially in government agencies, who may already have salary support provided. So it's just more about how engaged they are in the work. And if they are kind of considered a full member of the project team and they're actually going to be executing on the project tasks, then they should be brought in as a co-investigator. We broke out those categories of investigator, partner, and stakeholder just to clarify that we don't want you to have your science end user as a co-investigator unless they actually are participating fully in the project. It helps us better understand. It helps us better understand what actually you intend to do, and then how at the end of the project to look at what you did and compare. So yeah, hope that answered your question.
This is Theo again. Can we address multiple science objectives? Like the watershed I'm interested in working in, has a future flow component, but could also have support of, tribal members component because there's a downstream reservation that has a water right. Does that kind of thing fly?
Yes. So in your statement of interest, we ask that you just specify which priorities you're addressing, and you're welcome to address more than one. And that will help us kind of figure out how we kind of chunk out things for review and things like that. So yeah, totally able to address multiple priorities.
Great, thanks.
Okay, well, if we have no other questions, I will go ahead and stop us. Like I said, you're always welcome to email myself and Elisa with any additional follow-up questions. We're both mostly working over the holidays, we may flex our hours a little, but we should be easy to get in touch with before January 14th. And we will make these slides available online along with the solicitation document. So thank you for joining us, and hope you all have a great rest of your day and your holiday season.
Thanks. Bye.